We're going to start our program as we normally do with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and the Texas Pledge. That's going to be led by our good friend Chuck Daniels. And then the invocation will be delivered by Barry Brown. So what I'm going to do is ask that you all please stand at this time for the pledges and remain standing, ladies and gentlemen, for our invocation.
Well, I don't know if this microphone is working, so stand if you're able. And we'll begin. There it is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now please remain standing for the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pray with me, please. Almighty God, thank you for the opportunity we have to gather together in a free country. We are grateful to be together and ask your blessing upon our meeting and upon the men who will be making their presentations to us. We thank you for their service to our country, and we pray for all the men and women who wear the uniform of our nation. We pray for their safety, for courage in the completion of their missions, and that you'll bring them home safely to their families. We lift up our nation and its leaders, that you will grant them wisdom and discernment. We thank you for the food we're about to enjoy, and for those who prepare and serve it. And Lord, we know that your ways are higher than our ways, and we know that all that we have and all that we are as individuals, as a community, and as a nation is because of your grace and mercy. We trust that your plan is the plan, and we're grateful to be able to play a part in your kingdom. You've paid the price to give us the opportunity to be able to spend eternity with you. And may your kingdom come on earth just as it is in heaven. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
That's great. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Chuck. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Well, it goes without saying, we are really delighted and most happy that we've got such a wonderful crowd here today, and certainly welcome each and every one of you. We have several retired general officers and many veterans in our audience, so thanks to all of you for your service. And if you're a first responder or a veteran, what I'd like to do right now is have you please stand so we can recognize and give you all one well-deserved collective round of applause. And I'm told we also have some elected officials here in the audience. Was I correct or incorrect? Do we have some? If you are an elected official, please raise your hand and stand and introduce yourself, please. Oh, hello. Now I know you. Go ahead.
Al Zapata, Irving City Council, Deputy Mayor.
And Al is involved with the Veterans Day Parade Foundation. Does tireless work over there for them as well. Anybody else? No, that's it? Okay, very good. Well, thank you all, and we appreciate your service, and we appreciate your being here today. One thing I'd like to make notice before we move on with our official program, we have one of our gentlemen that was going to be here, who you'll meet very, very shortly, was going to be here with us in person. But you'll hear shortly why he's not, and unfortunately that means we have to do something called Zoom that's become a part of our life the last couple of years, huh? So he's going to be, hopefully we'll be able to get that all set up. We were working on it just before the program here today and had some issues with some of the audio, but hopefully we've got everything rectified and we can do it virtually, and you'll be able to hear all the wonderful things that he has to share with us all. That said and done, one other thing that I'd like to remind you all, hopefully you've all checked in to buy tickets for the 50-50 raffle. Did you all do that? How many people got a ticket for the raffle? Well, a couple. But really, this is we had one person leave the last year that we did, he left with $78,000 at the end of the day. So, I just wanted to see if you're listening out there, okay? You can buy these tickets for $5 each, or you can get 5 for $20, so you get a freebie, I guess, best put. And at the end of the program, we'll draw the winning ticket for 50% of the proceeds, whatever we sell. That's Patty right there. Patty is going around, and she's, thank you, Patty, great to have you here again. She'd be more than happy to sell your raffle ticket, so all you've got to do is raise your hand or get her attention here before the end of the day, and we'll be taking care of that. So, all right, very good. Thank you much, Patty. But you want to do that before the end of the program so that you can be in the final drawing. And as most of you probably know by now, this series of programs is a joint effort by the Dallas chapters of the Military Order of the World Wars, the Navy League, the Jewish War Veterans, the Air and Space Forces Association, and the Audie Murphy chapter of the Association of the United States Army, to present a series of programs on issues that we all, as Americans, are certainly interested in every single day. Now, while these organizations have different programs and certainly different objectives, at the macro level, we all support the same thing, and that is making America stronger and supporting our servicemen and women, our veterans, our youth, and certainly our first responders. This series actually has two objectives. The first is to conduct interactive discussions about key national defense issues led by substantive subject matter experts, literally from all over the country. And the comments we've given from, well, we've gotten some incredible ones from our Season 1 events, indicates that the discussion and certainly the speakers, they were right on target every single Sunday afternoon that we did meet last year. And the questions were received from the audience were thoughtful and certainly insightful, so our congratulations to each and every one of you for really keeping it in motion last year. It was just wonderful, and we certainly hope that we'll be able to do the same thing here this afternoon and this evening. Our other purpose is to conduct a long-range capital campaign to support the charitable and veterans work of our partner organizations. And today, we're honored and certainly pleased to recognize all of our sponsors. These are the members of our team that are so generous, that really ante up, as they say, and really make a difference. And that includes our presenting sponsor, the Credit Union of Texas. Now, you may have also noticed, go ahead and give them a round of applause. Now, you may have also noticed their logo among our slides, and I want to call up to the stage Ted Buchans to recognize our sponsor, and he has a little presentation that he'd like to make. So let's give it up and put our hands together for Ted. Come on up, Ted. We got you parked over there in Lubbock, for Pete's sake, huh? Yeah, long walk.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, all right, on behalf of the Board of Directors and National Defense Briefing Series, to be able to recognize all of our sponsors this afternoon. As you can see, there are logos on our side. I want to give an especially big hand of recognition to our presenting sponsor, the Credit Union of Texas, and I'd like to introduce Lynn Ivey. Lynn, would you please come to the stage, right?
Hello everyone. Oh my God. You're not nervous being here? With all these people looking at you? All right, I'm gonna try my best. Hello, I'm so glad you all make it here. I'm gonna introduce myself. My name is Lynn Adi. I am a Community Engagement Officer with Credit Union of Texas. My whole involvement in this event started when I met Ted at the North Texas Veteran Luncheon, where he talked to me briefly about this event and other upcoming events for the year. I was very excited and interested to be part of this event as well as the upcoming events. It's an honor for me and Credit Union of Texas to support those of you who served and are still serving our country. The majority of the people in this room worked hard so that we may live in a safer tomorrow. So I would like to thank you all on behalf of myself and everyone at Credit Union of Texas. Cybersecurity became very important nowadays, so we appreciate you for educating us about it. It's very important that we became familiar with this technology, as it will only continue to expand and become more complicated as it gets more involved in our lives. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who was involved in making this event happen and be as great. Thank you so much.
Lynn, we're very grateful for your support shown to us by the Credit Union of Texas. And they stepped up to be our first Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz sponsor. One would assume that the age of the people in the audience, one knows who Chester Nimitz was, right? In recognition, we want to make a small presentation. First, I'd like the employees of the Credit Union of Texas sitting in the front table. Please stand up, please. Be very nice to that gentleman. He's Lynn's boss. Second, I'd like to present limited edition T-shirts. You will see some of the people like Chuck and others who are wearing a special shirt. Unfortunately, those are in the mail, right? But as soon as we get them, we've got the sizes for the individuals that you gave us, and we'll be getting those shirts to you, okay? Second, I'd like to discuss with you, okay, will be your featured Credit Union of Texas logo on all of our publicity, on our website when it's complete, and we thank you again for your support. Appreciate it. Behind me, you'll see the sponsorship structure, and if you've enjoyed our programs, we hope you'll consider contributing at one of these levels so you too can take the opportunity to tell your story on the stage. Finally, while I'm on stage, I'd like to briefly mention some significant events that occurred over the last year. You've heard from Scott that we had a very successful first year. So much so that this has allowed us to incorporate, and we've incorporated as a 501c3 organization. All right? This makes life a lot easier for us because those of you who were here last year, when you wanted to make your payments, we had to go through the Navy League. Now we'll have our website up by the end of summer, and you'll be able to make them directly. Second, we have our website up, should be up by the end of the summer, where you'll have access to all the pictures, all the previous presentations, and give you an opportunity to view all of these, all right? And finally, we're planning for our annual membership plan for our programs to make it more convenient for you to register and become part of our organization. We may also look at changing our structure a bit, and the structure may be to a membership structure, but once we get our website up, we'll be able to get all of that information to you. I thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. This will give you some idea of what the Credit Union of Texas is doing for our local organizations. By the way, ladies, if you ever need police protection, I can assure you, Lynn is one of the most safely kept ladies in this area, all right? Thank you very much. Scott?
That's great. Thanks, Ted, very, very much. And Lynn, thanks to you. Thanks to you very much, and certainly to the Credit Union of Texas for your wonderful generosity. So we'll see you for what, for the next 10 years? Is that what the contract is? Okay, just checking, just checking. We want to make sure you're sticking with us. Okay, that's good. And you know, there's also a couple of other people that I was made note of that are here today that were with us individually, not as a corporation like you know, the credit union, but they have just always been there for us all last year and again today. So I'd like to make note of Alan and Diane Johnson. Where might they be? Thank you so much for your generosity and your continued support. That's great. That's great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're ready, I'm ready, and I know everybody else is. So we're going to move on with our program today, and our topic is entitled Cyberspace Operations More Than Cybersecurity. And we're honored to have with us 3 subject matter experts with deep experience in that warfighting domain, and well, they're going to be with us in just a couple of minutes. But right now, what I'm going to do is turn over the mic to General Campbell, who will introduce our program and panelists. But first, I just want to say a few words about our agenda today, okay? Now, during the speakers' presentations, this is very important. We're going to be having people going around and you'll have coffee at your table, tea and water, as well as a cash bar. It's right over there in that direction. Some of you might already taken advantage of that. But we'd like you to be, well, when you're in the back of the room and everything, just try and be as quiet as you can. We want to show the speakers, whoever might be here on the stage, and even whether we're doing it virtually, that everybody is quiet and polite as they can so we don't disturb during the presentation. Now, once the Q&A starts, the Great Heritage Ranch, the waitstaff will start serving appetizers. So again, please try and keep the noise to a minimum. I know you're all very polite and very considerate, so I don't have to worry about that, but just want to remind you of that fact. And please, because of discussions like these generate lots of questions, in consideration of our speakers' time and yours, we're going to have a hard stop time of 6:15 tonight. All right? Or for that matter, if there's a couple extra questions, yes, we'll be more than happy, so whenever the questions run out. But we're definitely going to stop by around the 6:15 time period. That's a little longer than our previous programs because we have 3 panelists today. Once the program is concluded, you're welcome to stay and certainly use this as an opportunity to network and talk with other guest speakers and the representatives of our sponsoring organizations. Get a chance to learn to know each other and maybe you'll get a couple of new friends along the way. And you'll notice that they all have membership tables around the room. You see them in the back over there in that area. So please take advantage of those. Stop by and pick up their material, and please consider the sponsorship opportunities that Ted will explain. And so we can't thank you enough. Are you going to do that? Who's going to? Is he going to explain that? Okay, good. Finally, again, our 50-50 raffle. We're all about trying to stay as solvent as we can. We want to make as much money as we can. It's all for a great cause, as you all well know. So please don't forget the 50-50 raffle. Where's Patty? There she is, Patty McCoy, right over there. So she'd love to sell you a ticket during the program or whatever. Just again, keep it to a dull roar, as they say. Also, we're going to be splitting the proceeds, and just as I was coming back up here, I also find out that not only are we going to split the proceeds, but we also, did you see the gorgeous day out here on this Sunday afternoon, sunny in the great golf course? You're going to get round of 4 for golf. So if you'd like to play a round of golf out here for 4, it's don't get much better than that. We are also going to be giving that away as well, but you can't take part unless you're a part of the 50-50 raffle. So that's it, said and done. Can't thank you enough. I'm going to step aside and are you ready, my friend? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome the General himself, General Campbell.
Thank you, Scott. As I always say, we're a bunch of amateurs, and Scott is a professional and makes us look good. So thank you, Scott. That's a big job. So this is going to be a bit of a high wire act today. So have patience. What we needed was a 17-year-old tech-savvy teenager, and what we had were 5 60-year-olds all trying to help. So we'll see how it works out. So I'm John Campbell. I'm the president of the Dallas chapter of the Air and Space Forces Association. It doesn't roll off the tongue very well because we used to be the Air Force Association, but we took Space Force under our wing, and we're now the advocacy group for them also. We still use the initials AFA, and our website's still afa.org because you can't get 3-letter websites anymore. But we're a new organization. Before I get to the program today, I want to give you a preview of what we're going to do for the rest of season 2. We've got some really good programs, I think, coming up. Now, the first one, September 25th, this is tentative because we're still negotiating with these speakers, but our topic's going to be air and naval power in the 21st century. And if you've been watching the budget discussions, watching world events, this is a huge issue. We've got a couple of subject matter experts, Admiral Jim Fogo, he's the Dean of the Center for Maritime Strategy of the Navy League. That's the Navy League's think tank. His active duty job, the last active duty job was Commander of Air Force, United States Naval Forces, Europe, Africa. Our other panelist is Heather Penny. She's a senior analyst with the Mitchell Institute, which is the AFA think tank. Heather is not only one of the leading air power authorities in the country, she's also well known for the mission she flew on 9/11 as an F-16 pilot with the DC National Guard. If you do a little research, you can figure out what that was. I won't spoil it for you, but it's quite a story. and Heather is quite an articulate spokesman for air power. Skipping ahead to December, our third program is called Space, a Warfighting Domain. Our speaker is retired General Kevin Chilton, who is a really pretty incredible guy. He was a test pilot, a fighter pilot, test pilot, an astronaut. He flew 2 shuttle missions and was last the commander of U.S. Strategic Command. That's the Nuclear Warfighting Command. He's a leading advocate for space and one of the smartest and most articulate guys that I know. And he said not long ago, he said, you know, man has never found a domain he didn't want to fight in. So that was his entry to space. It also, I think, applies to what we're going to do today. So any military operation has rules of engagement, or ROE. I'll quickly go over our ROE for today, and I think most of you have been here before, are familiar with it. We'll have a Q&A session once we get through the opening remarks. I know that this group always has great questions. These are the 3 ways you can submit those. If you have your phone or pad handy, you can just simply email them to ndbs.questions@gmail.com, and I'll have my iPad open and I'll get those questions. If you want, there are 3x5 cards laying on each table. You can write your question down on that card, and Bob Gaybauer will hold your hand up. Bob will come pick it up and get it up to me. Finally, at the end, if we have time, we'll do a live Q&A session. And we have a couple of microphones available, so if you would like to ask a question, hold your hand up. We'll get you a mic, and you want to use the mic so we can hear the question. Just please make it a question and not a speech. Experience has shown that we typically have a lot more questions than we have time, so we may just have to cut it off. And typically, if we have written questions, we'll try to respond to you later and answer those questions. That brings us to the second rule of engagement. Cyber operations, particularly the offensive and exploitation parts, are some of the most highly classified capabilities that we have. You guys are an inventive audience, so you may ask questions that our speakers just can't answer, and if that's the case, they will tell you so, and that's okay. And finally, we have a non-attribution policy, which means please don't attribute any remarks to a specific speaker, and if you do, that will help us. It'll help us have a free and open discussion. We are videotaping this, and we intend to post it on our website, and we'll send you the link once the speakers have cleared it. So let me talk briefly about why we selected the topic. You know, we all know about cybersecurity. We hear about it every day. We're nagged to change our passwords, warned not to click on suspicious links or open unknown attachments, and be sure to update your computer. We read every week about some breach that's allowed theft of somebody's property or bank account, or a ransomware attack which locks up a hospital's operational computer. So cybersecurity is important, but it's only a part of a much larger realm of cyber operations, which includes offense, defense, and exploitation or intelligence gathering. And we'll talk today about each of those activities. These are some terms of reference we'll use today, just so we're clear about what we're talking about. All of our panelists are former military cyberspace operators, and so these generally hew to the military definitions of operations. What is cyberspace? Well, cyberspace is that environment, that domain, which is created by the information technology infrastructures, includes the hardware, the software, and all the data that resides in it. Operations in cyberspace include the range of activities that we do to defend our cyber systems and infrastructure from attack, and we call that defensive cyberspace operations, or to attack our adversaries' infrastructure, systems, and data, to destroy them, change them, or deny access, or to steal that data, which is exploitation or espionage. We also sometimes conduct attacks on physical systems through cyberspace, and all those activities are termed offensive cyberspace operations. Finally, in the DoD parlance, network operations are what we do to build, maintain, and operate the cyberspace infrastructure that create that cyberspace. DoD calls that the DoD Information Network, which is what DoD operates for its business. So while a lot of what we're going to talk about can get into classified discussions. We won't do that, but the panel will today talk about how all these pieces fit together and how they help us achieve our national objectives. So we're privileged today to have 3 speakers. 2 of them are here, 1 is virtual. I'll just briefly show this and then I'll take it down and we'll bring up General Radke. But our first speaker is General Harry Radke. Harry now is in Colorado Springs with tested positive for COVID. Harry is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Cybersecurity Center in Colorado Springs, and his previous life was Director of Defense Information Systems Agency and Manager of the National Communications System. In his NCS role, he led efforts to restore communications in the Pentagon and throughout New York City following the 9/11 attacks. In his cyberspace operations hat, he served as a Deputy Commander for Global Network Operations for Strategic Command and was a commander of the Joint Task Force for Global Network Operations, one of the predecessor organizations for Cyber Command, which you'll hear about today. Our second panelist who is with us today is General Kevin McLaughlin. Kevin is currently the Professor of Practice at the Bush School Department of International Affairs at Texas A&M, and also the Director of the school's new program in Cyber Policy, Security, and Strategy. His last position before his retirement from the Air Force was the Deputy Commander of the United States Cyber Command, which is the combatant command which conducts offensive and defensive operations for the Department of Defense. That's where the rubber meets the road. Our third panelist is Colonel Lamont Adkins, who just retired from the U.S. Air Force last month. In his last Air Force job, he was the Director of Operations, basically the COO for 16th Air Force and Air Force's Cyber, which is the Air Force component to Cyber Command. So he worked for General McLaughlin at his counterpart. In that role, he did the operations of the Air Force's, DoD's first information warfare enterprise, integrating intelligence, surveillance, and all the bits and parts of cyberspace operations. Colonel Atkins also serves on the board of directors for the Armed Force Communications Electronic Association. Just accepted a position with McKinsey & Company in Dallas, a global management firm. So, Kevin, congratulations. I know you're looking forward to your new role. Chuck, can you bring let's try the Zoom, or see if we can get the Zoom screen up. So I know all these, the acronyms and military titles are a little bit confusing. One of our goals this evening is to have our panelists put all that in context and explain to you how they fit together and how we conduct operations. So this is General Radke. Harry, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Sue.
Good. Good. I'm so relieved. Chuck, why don't you go full screen? Harry, I'm not sure if you heard that introduction that I gave you. I described a little bit of what you've done in your career, but we're glad you are here with us virtually. We're certainly sorry you're not with us virtually, or not with us physically, but the floor is over to you for your opening remarks.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me well. Give me a thumbs up. All right, that's perfect. Well, first off, I'm sorry I can't be there. I'm in my last day, I think, of being contagious with this Omicron, and I just didn't want to put any of you in jeopardy of that. Secondly, my apologies to General Campbell and General McLaughlin and Colonel Atkins for not being there. I sincerely was looking forward to seeing you and dining again with you, and also making some new friends there and being with all of you. And let me just say next, I really appreciate all of the extra trouble that John Campbell and Chuck have gone to, and others there, in trying to make it possible that I could share a few words with you today. So I know that wasn't easy. It's hard enough pulling off a great event like this when everybody shows up But, you know, we're learning new skills with all this Zoom capability and all, which actually serves us well. For example, in how I'm able to be there with you, at least virtually tonight. But following General Campbell's insightful introductory comments, which I had the opportunity to view earlier, and then to add my initial thoughts on cyberspace operations today, I've decided to divide my comments into three categories. Three main points, by the way, comes from my early military training when they taught us that 3 is a good number to use as far as main points in a presentation. So first, I'm going to provide some of my early observations in what we recognize today as cyberspace operations. Second, I'm going to give some basic thoughts about what's currently going on in cyberspace operations. And finally, I'm going to provide a few thoughts on what I see as the growing perfect storm involving cyberspace operations. So that's my lineup today. So to begin, the very obvious defacing of Department of Defense and Microsoft websites was universally recognized around the 1992 timeframe. I know people were breaking into the Pentagon's computer systems. On the website, they would post derogatory comments about the Department of Defense, and then Bill Gates at Microsoft also suffered a lot from having mustaches drawn on him and devil's points on his head. This was sort of the malicious activity that was going on in the early times. And although not malicious at first, when novice hackers just wanted to show that they could beat our technology, in other words, say, you're not that smart, look how I've broken into you. The intrusions and attacks from then on became more sophisticated and harmful over time. And the hacker problem continued to intensify, and by 1998, at the annual Secretary of Defense conference with the 4-star combatant commanders present, the Deputy Secretary of Defense asked for a roundtable discussion about who was best of those around the table to be responsible for and to take charge of Department of Defense computer network defense, now commonly being referred to as CND. After a hearty discussion, General Dick Myers, the United States Space Command commander at that time, was assigned this new mission and responsibility. And on his flight home from Washington, D.C. to Colorado Springs, General Myers called me from the aircraft and asked me to be in his office early the next morning, since I was assigned as the Director of Command and Control and Communications. After a quick initial senior leaders meeting, the U.S. Space Command staff immediately began planning how to address this new global mission area. And what resulted after several weeks of tough discussion and planning was to establish a joint task force for computer network defense, more commonly referred to as JTF-CND. And with Major General at that time, John Campbell, selected as the first commander. We decided to stand up this JTF-CND within the Defense Information Systems Agency and co-locate it within DISA's Network Operations and Security Center, which was located in Arlington, Virginia at that time. General Campbell was already serving as the vice director of DISA, so this arrangement, along with John's strong background, experience, and leadership skills, made perfect sense to all of us. So General Campbell and his initial staff of, I believe, 24 people earnestly began to establish the mission, numerous working relationships across the military, services, and intelligence agencies of the Department of Defense, the telecommunications industry, and other activities and organizations that would be required for this new global mission enterprise. And as the JTF-C&D effort developed, 4 distinct mission areas were being realized. First, everyone realized the obvious requirement for a DoD foundation and platform in allowing the network operations, thus referred to as NetOps. This was provided by DISA. Next, you had to protect and defend that network, thus C&D, Computer Network Defense. Third, it was coming into clear focus now that developing offensive computer operations also was important for us to start considering. And we called this mission area Computer Network Attack, or CNA. And finally, by working daily with the intelligence community, we could learn more about hackers, bad actors, and aggressors through an active exploitation capability that we referred to as Computer Network Exploitation, or CNE. So here we had it, NetOps, C&D, CNA, and CNE as we move forward in those early days. And these 4 areas were continually developed and eventually evolved into the now formally recognized general areas noted earlier by General Campbell as network operations, defensive cyberspace operations, and offensive cyberspace operations. On the overall national level front, what was increasingly being recognized was that focus on the information technology, operations, and security mission spaces was now coming out of the pure information technology offices and directly into the DoD Situation Room at the Pentagon and industry's boardrooms. For the DoD, all of this continued to evolve since the humble beginnings of the JTF-C&D in 1998 to the elevation of the United States Cyber Command, U.S. Cyber Command, in August of 2017, just less than 5 years ago, as a full and independent unified combatant command. Up until about 10 years ago then, our national security depended on securing operations in 4 domains: land, sea, air, and space. However, in the 2010 timeframe, we realized that a new operational domain for our nation's security had evolved, now referred to as cyberspace, the 5th operational domain. Our nation now found itself enjoying the terrific benefits and opportunities of cyberspace, but also confronted with a number of national security issues that were developing in very sophisticated ways. And over the years, I've witnessed the emergence of 4 categories of what I'll call cyber intrusions. First, cyber attacks, including destruction, sabotage, and denial of service of Department of Defense systems, components, and individual equipment, along with continuing attacks on American financial institutions and our nation's power grid. Second, cyber espionage and exploitation, where the Department of Defense classified networks have been breached by hackers, and sensitive information concerning America's modern weapon systems, critical infrastructure, and industrial control system have been pirated by outside activities. Third, cyber data breaches and theft, where terabytes of data, quite often your own personal identity and information, are being stolen, quite often by others for financial gain. And fourth, cybercrime, where techniques like ransomware are now becoming commonplace and just recently was used against the Boston Children's Hospital in order to shut down operations until a ransom was paid. Unfortunately, ransomware has now been recognized as the cybersecurity scourge of 2021. In addressing these major national security issues, our Department of Defense and other federal government activities continue to evolve with critical improvements in the NetOps, defensive cyberspace operations, and offensive cyberspace operations arenas. In addition, an active defense philosophy has emerged, along with the newest considerations and capabilities for forward defense. Of special note, there have been some significant decisions and actions taken by the current executive, legislative, and judicial branches, including, first, the appointment of Chris Inglis as the first National Cyber Director who works in the White House, and legislation which authorized and appropriated increased funding for cyberspace, cybersecurity, and critical national infrastructure. Also, it's currently being reviewed whether and how to change previous policy which gave unprecedented authority to the Department of Defense and U.S. Cyber Command to authorize cyber operations without White House approval. The presidential policy currently gives well-defined authorities to the Secretary of Defense to conduct time-sensitive military operations in cyberspace. And as we know and recognize as uniquely different than the other four domains, cyberspace operations take place at what we refer to as network speed, with the stealthiness and clandestine speed of electrons. Of particular note, General Nakasone, the U.S. Cyber Command commander, has said that, quote, if we find ourselves defending inside our own networks, we have lost the initiative and the advantage, unquote. Interestingly, the counter-argument for continuing with current SecDef authorities is that, quote, if you're not in combat, the commander is supposed to check in with the White House and the president. The White House should have control. That's how it works, end quote. As far as the future is concerned in the area of cyberspace operations, the perfect storm seems to be building around the intersection of numerous technologies, such as quantum computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud technology, 5G, blockchain, cybersecurity, augmented reality, robotic process automation, and autonomous security. Many experts believe that the advanced computing capabilities of quantum computers will render most traditional encryption protocols used today obsolete. Think about that. Limited electronically held and shared national security secrets and related operations. We actually could be reduced to passing handwritten memos to each other via Tesla runs. Of course, those operations might be suspended if we experience an electromagnetic pulse event, which would render the Teslas useless. Through release by a former Secretary of Defense, we know that China and Russia have weaponized space with jammers, cyber attack capabilities, and anti-satellite missile systems that we have entered an era of great competition. Unfortunately, space, the fourth operational domain, is no longer considered a sanctuary. It is now considered a warfighting domain. And as General Campbell has noted in the subtitle of our discussion today, cyberspace operations are more than just cybersecurity. Today, we are a very capable nation of defending our national security, but many other areas will remain very vulnerable. According to General Nakasone, the SolarWinds software attack disclosed in December 2020 was a turning point for the United States. In his words, a foreign adversary was trying to do harm to our nation. Chris Inglis, the National Cyber Director, notes that the United States should be prepared to fire cyber bullets in response to significant hacking attacks as part of a comprehensive strategy to dissuade adversaries. Ransomware attacks also have risen now to become a national security issue, not just a criminal activity. And finally, I believe that our good friend, General Kevin Chilton, is right. Man has never found a domain he didn't want to fight in. And that now goes for the fifth domain and cyberspace operations. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attention tonight. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you. We're going to leave we'll just leave the Zoom window open, and hopefully you can follow the discussion. That was a great overview of sort of where DoD has come from in the world of cyber operations. But it's more than cybersecurity. We're going to get into that the next part here. Our second speaker will be General Kevin McLaughlin. He will give his remarks and then take a seat at the table. And once everybody's done, we'll start the Q&A session. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, sort of continuing on the theme of General Radke, but instead of having 3 points, I'm going to have 2 sets of 3 points. The first is, Victoria and I live in a little town called Bastrop, Texas, and we love being Kevin and Victoria in a little town, but it is great to be with all of you and just be around a group of people that we have so much shared experience with. Thanks for all that you do in your communities, but thank you for your service to your country. I see a lot of service pins, and also for Lamont. You can tell by looking at the crowd, retirement's pretty good. Just come on in. Water's just fine. My second point is how much I learned, don't speak after General Radke. When First Lieutenant McLaughlin worked in a building at U.S. Air Force Space Command headquarters way back whenever I was a first lieutenant, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Radke was one of the folks in our vault. And I have looked up to General Radke and listened to him and learned from him for all that time. So it's great to see you. I'm sorry we weren't able to be together in person. And last, what we're going to talk about today is really important, in my opinion. The 3 things substantively I'd like to describe in just my brief remarks are just continuing on with General Radke's comments, a little bit of the context about the domain of cyber and the threat that led us to create U.S. Cyber Command. And I'll spend quite a bit of time on what U.S. Cyber Command is as one of the responses our nation's taken due to this threat. And I'll spend a little bit of time, and I will try to not make it dry or be jargony, talking about some of the new authorities and some of the things the President has directed in terms of what U.S. Cyber Command can do. General Radke touched on it. I'll expand a bit, as well as some key things that Congress has done to sort of make sure that what we're doing in DoD is anchored in law. In some cases, to help define the difference between what the military does versus what the intelligence community does in cyber. So first, a few things in my English on what's unique about cyber. So it was General Campbell put some definitions up, but let me just talk to you about it in a way that I think maybe will make sense to you. First of all, this domain is the only domain of warfare that is made by people. God did not make cyber. He made air, land, sea, space, and air. You know, those are domains that when you're going to fight in it, you don't change air or create air when you're going to fly your airplane through it to go do the mission. But cyber is made by people and it's changed by people. One thing that's very interesting by the operators, the people that log onto computer and attack our enemies or defend, is they are changing the domain at the same time they're maneuvering through the domain. Which is really fascinating when you're sitting down watching some young person who actually has 4 or 5 screens of script running on there, and they're maneuvering through cyberspace, they're changing things, they're unlocking things, they're blocking things. At the same time, the enemy's doing that to us. So that's one thing that's really, really interesting about this domain. The other thing that makes it thorny and hard is if you think about those military definitions of cyber, which are accurate, those are the ones we use in the military, there's really a broader construct behind the domain, and that is everything we do today in business, not just in the military, but including the military, but also culturally, exists and takes place in the internet. I would imagine the oldest person in this room probably has a smartphone. And so that foundation of the internet to society in our country and in others means that the threats that exist against that domain are way more serious than the threats that might exist of an advanced fighter to our fighters or an advanced tank to our tanks. It is something that affects our country at a societal level in a way that I think is unique. The last thing I would say about the domain is that those threats then mean the problems we have to solve in the military include lots of things that threaten non-military targets. Harry mentioned the electric grid, financial systems, but it's other classes of what we call critical infrastructure, health services, transportation, you name it. That infrastructure that we depend on to survive as a country is today all enabled and powered by cyberspace. Our enemies don't just attack military targets in cyber, they're going to attack those capabilities, and I'll give you some examples of how that happens. In terms of the threat, the way my simple brain thinks about how the threats evolved and why we've created things like US Cyber Command is we did go from defacing websites, today things we might think were sort of juvenile in nature, to things like denial of service attacks from the Iranians against our banks, trying to make it to where banks couldn't talk to their customers or to each other. That we then very quickly moved to the point to where we started seeing cyber being used to do physical damage. You can go through cyber and you can go into a transformer or a generator or something and actually make a physical thing break. It's possible you could make an airplane crash. Everything today, our platforms are connected to the internet and they're made up of embedded computers and controllers. And so as you think about the type of destructive attacks that could happen through cyber, most people think you could just make a computer quit working. You could actually physically destroy something at scale. We've seen the Russians as an example, not just in the Ukraine conflict now, but even going back several years ago. The Russians conducted some of the first destructive attacks in cyber. They attacked the Ukrainians several years ago. They attacked their power grid. One of the most significant things that ever happened, they attacked, of all places, the Estonians not very many years ago, it's one of the first sort of destructive set of attacks where they kind of brought their government ability to function to a halt. So the threat has gotten more and more serious, so the government decided to do lots of things about it, but one of those, as both Harry mentioned, how SOUP was a key leader in one of the, I would say, the predecessors of the US Cyber Command, but in 2010, we took those parts and we brought them together in the first instantiation of US Cyber Command. At the time, it was a sub-unified 4-star command underneath US Stratcom. You see that General Chilton's coming in soon. General Chilton retired me from the Air Force not very many years ago, so that'll be a great speaker. We'll have to join y'all's chapter so we can come up and hear him speak. But at the time, it was a 4-star command, but it was underneath another combatant command. It was not yet a combatant command, but in 2013, we were told to do something significant, and that was start building the military forces that you need to fight in cyberspace. It's the equivalent of fighter squadrons. It's the actual arms and legs of a cyber force. We had a headquarters, we had some capability, but we did not have forces that were actually assigned to do computer network defense and computer network attack. So we started building what we called the Cyber Mission Force in 2013. By the way, y'all might remember the 4-letter word called sequestration. We were in the middle of sequestration, which was the Budget Control Act, where Congress thought we would never do this, and then if we can't pass a balanced budget, we'll cut randomly across the DOD, I think 20%, some huge amount out of our budget. Well, we did it multiple years in a row. And so at the same time sequestration was causing us to park fighter squadrons, active duty fighter squadrons in the Air Force, we were creating a thing called the Cyber Mission Force. 6,187 new people across the military services in 133 teams. And those were our first teams that we were going to use to do our warfighting. You'll hear some from Lamont later about of the Air Force's view of what they did in that area. But we built about half offensive teams and about half defensive teams. What's interesting and about this point also is we decided to publicly tell the U.S. public and our adversaries that we were building offensive capability. There was a very significant debate, should we keep all that secret? And the decision was no, we're going to publicly state that we're building offensive cyber capability, just like we have offensive capabilities in the other domains. So in 2013 we started, and by 2016, all 133 teams were at their initial capability, and then by 2019, they were all at full operating capability, which is after the command became a full-up combatant command. In addition, how is that command organized? It's pretty much like any other combatant command. It has a staff, and it has service components. Each one of the military services has a component to U.S. Cyber Command. I was as a 2-star, I was the Air Force's Cyber Command commander. Same organization Lamont just retired from, and with that hat, I worked for the commander of U.S. Cyber Command, and I presented forces to him, and he gave us orders, and we executed missions on behalf of the command. We also created some special joint commands, one called the Cyber National Mission Force, which does one of the 3 key missions. I'll tell you about the 3 missions in a second. We also have an organization that is very similar to what JTF-GNO was. We have a new joint force headquarters for DOD information operations. And that 3-star is still dual-hatted as the DISA director, but his job, it has a lot more authority today. His job is to not only to defend the entire DOD, but he has the authority to direct any defensive reaction anywhere in the Department of Defense on any network. It is a broad set of authorities. The missions assigned to this command were really simple. There are 3 of them. First, operate and defend the DoD information network. Second, to defend actively defend any of those networks against threat. And then last, as they're, in addition to defending the nation, they also provide offensive operations support to all the combatant commanders, all of the geographic and functional combatant commanders. That's the 3 things that General Nakasone is tasked to do. One thing that makes that complicated today, because it's just the nature of warfare, he at the same time can be a supported commander. So for those of you who have lived in the supporting commander, in other words, who's in charge and who's responsible to support the person in charge. We used to like to have it where it's clear, the one commander's in charge, everybody else supports. Warfare today means that our actors are attacking us throughout. They're attacking us in space, they're attacking in cyber, they're attacking in the homeland, they're presenting a nuclear threat, and they're doing things in an area of responsibility. For that reason, General Nakasone, the first offensive operations we conducted when I was the deputy, which we did, we said we can't tell us anything classified, but we announced to the public we were doing this. We started offensive operations against ISIL. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? But at the time, there were things that General Nakasone was the commander that was supported and was in charge of certain things we were doing globally. And at the very same time, he was the supporting the commander to U.S. Central Command. So you have to be ambidextrous and you have to be able to do things in a much more flexible and agile way than we used to do. So for those missions, the command has matured significantly. I left in 2017, and I will tell you what they're doing today makes it look like we were in kindergarten in 2017. But the big change today, and I'll just move on to the last part of my remarks on authorities, is we realized all the way back during the time frame where I was there, is that our adversaries had realized that the U.S. Has this gap in our authority and our policy. We were really good at fighting when we went to conventional war. We either thought we were at peace or we were in conflict or a crisis leading to conflict. So Russia and China in particularly had figured out a way to attack us below those levels, what we call it, the below the level of armed conflict. In other words, in an area we didn't really have any authorities to respond. They did it in 4 areas. Paul Nakasone calls these corrosive cyber attacks, and they're long-term attacks. Each one by itself is not significant, but they occur over years. And at the end of those years, strategic harm has happened to the country. They've stolen our IP is the first one. Really, China's lead in this. Some leaders have called it the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. Every one of those might have been an espionage attack, which is really not against the law, but when you add it up, the culmination of that is a strategic harm to our country. We've invested trillions to invent things that no one else could invent, and they stole it and took advantage of it without having to spend a fraction of that. The second area is stealing personal information on almost our whole society, including, for those of you who have had a security clearance, which most of you in the room used to, your security investigation records that the Office of Personnel Management stored were stolen by the Chinese back in the mid part of the last decade. Everything in my most precious secrets that I had to write down on my form to have a clearance, they have that on all of us. And they use that to harm us. The third area is they position themselves, the Russians are really good at this, with destructive capabilities in our critical infrastructure. The Trump administration announced back during President Trump's term that the Russians had the same malware in our critical infrastructure that they had used to destroy critical infrastructure in other countries. It wasn't there because they were collecting intelligence, it was there to threaten us and to try to deter the United States. I kind of think of it about, it's kind of like missiles in Cuba. Some people might not think it's that serious, but we almost went to war with the Soviet Union. They didn't attack us with those missiles, but they threatened us in an unacceptable way. Some of these threats to critical infrastructure, I think, begin to rise to that level. The last thing is, and this is the one that I think drove some of the new authorities, is countries like the Russians attack the democratic values that we hold dear in democratic institutions like our elections. Some of the things we care about the most as Americans. They did it in the 2016 presidential election. And those 4 areas of corrosive cyber attacks generated a whole new set of authorities and a new set of operations that we call persistent engagement. General Radke alluded to it. Persistent engagement are a set of authorities given to U.S. Cyber Command under a new presidential authority issued by President Trump that basically authorizes a set of operations where the president still authorizes it, but once he gives authority to U.S. Cyber Command and the director of NSA, who are the same individual, they have the authority to go execute these operations using all kinds of tools, including offensive tools, against entities like the Russians today. And they are not aimed at starting conventional war, but they are aimed at the first time for fighting back. And so what's interesting also to me is that the government has acknowledged that we're doing this in a way that lets the American people and our adversaries know, even though a lot of the details are kept secret. General Nakasone first used these authorities again to defend the 2018 midterm elections. He created an entity called the Russia Small Group. He had a very senior Air Force general officer, Lieutenant General now, Tim Hawk. Tim Hawk was a young one-star. He was the Cyber Command lead, and then a lady named Ann Neuberger was the NSA lead, and they created this thing called the Russia Small Group, and they executed the first ever persistent engagement operations against the Russians. And they did a couple very unique things. First, we sent teams forward, we call them hunt forward. We sent US teams into countries on the periphery of the Soviet Union that we knew the Russians had penetrated their networks, and we showed up there with our experts. We made it open we were coming, and we told the world we're there helping our partners secure their networks. And we found all kinds of Russian malware and Russian capabilities in there, and guess what we did with it? We didn't take it back to Fort Meade and study it. We made it public immediately. We started sharing that information with the public. Even at CNN more lately it's a very powerful set of sort of strategic disclosures of what that adversary was doing, and we did it in a way that surprised them. They certainly used intelligence to share with the Department of Justice and our allies. They shared things that would have never been shared before. And then the part he doesn't speak much about is he said we conducted offensive operations against that same actor. They've never disclosed which actor. There was many things in the press about that. But this type of operations now has been going on the times it's been disclosed, 2018 midterms, the 2020 general election, and then General Nakasone just this week was very public about what we've been doing in support of the Ukraine since the Ukrainian attacks. So not really defending the elections, but he acknowledged in a pretty broad-ranging interview. I'd suggest to you to Google Bob Nakasone and look at this because it's very informative. But he said, we have been conducting offensive operations against the Russians as part of the response to the Ukrainian invasion. Did not give any details. But he made it clear that we have, and he listed all these other things that we've done similar. We've released information to the CNN and others about what the Russians are doing. We are active against that adversary today, but not in a way where we're trying to create conventional war between us, but in a way that we're actively engaged with them every day. So the command is maturing rapidly. I would say the Congress, you might think they don't move very quickly, but I'll end with just some things to say. The Congress is keeping up. One of the big battles, to be honest, that we had in my time frame when I was still on active duty, these new authorities that were on the horizon for Cyber Command were controversial in the government. They were controversial with some members of the intelligence community, with Department of State. There was a desire to not get too far out in front or maybe set precedents in cyber that we might regret later. But in a way, we created a policy where you had to have concurrence among everybody to do something. And so what Congress did was to help us with that. They first passed a number of things in National Defense Authorization Acts, especially in 2019 was the most significant one, but did three kind of simple things. One is they codified that military offensive operations would be handled in accordance with international law and were no different than other warfighting domains. They're trying to normalize this. They also said that DOD would have the authority to fight in red space, what we call hostile enemy space, if any attacks occurred to institutions like our democratic institutions like elections. And then third, they said that if we need to do even what we call clandestine military operations in cyber, that those would be viewed as traditional military activities. Now what's that jargon mean? The jargon means many thought if we were going to do something really secret in cyber and we weren't at war, that would always be something that would be handled by the intelligence community as a covert action. Something that only has authorities in parts of the intelligence community. The president has to issue a finding and notification to the Congress has to happen in a certain way. It's a very controlled, limited set of activities. Congress said if you're doing clandestine military operations, which is just like what SOCOM, Special Operations Command, would do, it's a traditional military activity. You don't have to report that as a special finding to the Congress. What Congress was doing was carving out the United States military, U.S. Cyber Command, can and will conduct operations of the type that I've mentioned, and they kind of set in place the authorities to do that in the law. The one thing I would say as I wrap up, General Nakasone's remarks that were in his speech or his interview just this week, he not only said we are attacking, we have conducted offensive operations against the Russians as part of the Ukrainian response, but he said we did it consistent with the U.S. law. We did it consistent with U.S. policy, and we did it under the leadership and oversight of our civilian leaders. So, in other words, someone didn't delegate some broad general thing to him and he went off and did it. It's under the very direct control of the chain of command, but the chain of command is once they give the order, has given them the flexibility to execute that, which is what any commander actually would like to have, right? There are a lot of threats still to come. There's a lot of people who write on this with great aggression. It's amazing. I've been doing this for a while, and the only thing I know is I don't know anything in cyber. It is changing so quickly. Anyone who says they're an expert on everything is just not telling you the truth. And many of them, they'll decide to write articles all the time about because X, Y, and Z have happened, that we should make a strong assumption about what will happen. We're only in the first inning. We just had maybe one out in the first inning of a 9-inning game of the evolution of cyber warfare. We don't, just because certain things have or haven't happened doesn't mean what will happen in the future. The past is not prologue when it comes to cyber warfare. So I think Cyber Command will keep up with it, but I would encourage every one of you, pay attention. Your elected officials listen to you. You could be as informed an audience as anything, and the speaker series that you all have created allows you to do so. Look forward to your questions. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to hearing what Lamont has to say. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. I want to say thanks to General Campbell, General McLaughlin, and General Radke for allowing me to share in this event today. But I also want to say as we start up that you guys owe me, and I'll explain it, right? So I just retired 3 weeks ago, right? That was my ceremony. I'm still on terminal leave. First week in July, my wife and I will celebrate our 25th anniversary. She reminded me, thank you. So she reminded me as we were driving to Texas, she was like, hey, you know you owe me, I want a bet. And I'm like, what do you mean? We made a deal, a bet a few months ago how long it would take me after retirement before I get involved in something like this. And I told her about 3 months, and it's only been 3 weeks, so you guys owe me. So I want to say, also say thanks to the Texas Credit Union for your support and your continued involvement in what you do in the community across the state. It's interesting. I want to. So over the last 6 years, I've been in the Cyber Command enterprise. I just told the boss a couple of weeks ago, actually before I went to Cyber Command 6 years ago, he was able to help me land in the J3 and the ops side, so I was very thankful for that. It was a great opportunity from a career perspective, and I've learned a lot. So both general officers have talked a lot about the organization of U.S. Cyber Command. So I just want to level set before we open up for questions and talk more about the components, right? So if you look at it as 3 different types of components, we talked about JFHQ DOTN, which is responsible for defense of the DoD network, the Cyber National Mission Force, which is responsible more so for defense of the nation. Think hunt operations that was discussed earlier, or offensive operations towards malicious cyber actors that has intent towards the United States. So I want to focus a little bit more on where I spent the last 3 years, and that's at the service cyber component. So I went to, over the last 3 years, I've been in Air Force Cyber, either as a commander of the Air Force defensive teams or as the director of operations over the past year. I saw a lot of hands earlier of a lot of men and women that have served in the military. And also, if you've been in other organizations, we've all been through a restructure when we stood up an organization. But I want to make sure we all understand that everything that the speakers have talked about today, it did not exist a few years ago. What we have asked the airmen, soldiers, and sailors to do over the last few years and what they have accomplished is very significant, right? Just imagine standing up a headquarters, right, that's responsible for each service to organize, train, and equip. Not only that, to develop the standards, joint standards that you will train those airmen, sailors, and soldiers to, and develop the pipeline training and do all of that and accomplish the type of operations that the boss mentioned recently. We went from thinking about it and starting in 2013 to be an FOC with all 133 brand new teams around the 2018 through 2019 standpoint. And while they were building, also conducting operations. Imagine being able to move at that pace and then conduct operations against ISIS, being able to defend the midterm elections in 2018. What they have done has been very significant. So if you ever get an opportunity to see a young soldier, airman, or sailor that's in the cyber mission force, please congratulate them on a job well done, and they continue to perform in that manner. Not only, and as we talk about the organized training and equip piece, also want to just kind of level set and make sure we all have an appreciation for it. If you take a offensive operator, when they join us, we'll talk about the Air Force process, it takes about 12 months to go through the training pipeline to be an offensive operator. That's significant from a training standpoint because of the type of operations and the significance of what they're doing. So they continue to excel through the great guidance from U.S. Cyber Command and all the different cyber component leaderships and support from be it Congress and people like yourselves that continue to advocate on behalf of our military members. Also, with that Joint Force Headquarters hat on, they're also responsible for the OpCon portion of conducting operations. We all understand command and control and the importance of collaboration, but it's a little more complicated in cyber. We're trying to minimize the complexity of it, but you can take, for example, my previous boss, Lieutenant General Hawk. He had one hat that he was responsible for organizing, training, and equipping all airmen that was in the cyber mission forces and the teams that were aligned to him. In addition to that, he wore another hat as the Joint Force Headquarters Commander, where he was giving orders to teams, Air Force teams that he trained, as well as teams from other services as well. So we had Marine and Army teams aligned to General Hawk for operations that he had control over, and that kind of goes back to the significance of training and training to a joint standard. So we continue to kind of work that as from a command and control perspective. And also one other point I want to make is when you think about the type of operations, everything that General Hawk did from a execution standpoint was in support of a combatant command. So my single 3-star boss was responsible to the commander of U.S. Cyber Command to satisfy his priorities, responsible for the commander of U.S. STRATCOM and the warfighting priorities from that commander as well. The commander of U.S. EUCOM, also he just recently took up U.S. Space Command. So the complexity continues when it comes to a command and control standpoint and the complexities that you will see kind of at that component level. To add one more layer to it, General McLaughlin mentioned earlier, he talked about gaps and seams. If you want to find an expert on U.S. policy, go talk to the Russians or the Chinese, right? Because from a cyber perspective, that's where their attack is based on gaps in our policy and our governance documentation. For example, we fight a lot from a geographical standpoint, but in no way is cyber geographical in nature. So in addition to the responsibilities that the service components have, they also have they're each aligned a threat actor. So for example, General Hawk in Air Force Cyber, he's responsible for Russia. He is the single person that would be, in a certain sense, the supported commander for the Russia threat. That allows a single boss to be focused on that single threat actor, and he can bring all the different services together to move en masse. So we continue to mature. I think 2022 will be a great year for opportunity as the services continue to build out capability, continue to work with our military enlisted officers on their techniques and tactics as we continue to grow as an organization Our threat actors continue to grow in sophistication, but I think what we have in front of us through the support of the DoD from a cyber perspective and the way we're currently organized from U.S. Cyber Command across all of the COCOMs and within the service cyber components, that we'll be ready for that fight. I'll pause there and give it back a few minutes so we can start the Q&A portion of the event. Thank you.
Harry, do you want to turn your camera back on, and we will include you in the Q&A part? There you go. And can you hear us okay? Okay.
I can.
All right. Well, that was really good. Reminds me the comments about General McLaughlin made about things changing so much in his, since he had left the service, the time that I've left the service, it's really changed. It reminds me how old I am and how long it's been. But in a good way, because a lot of the things that we tried to put in place back in the day, I think, have taken root. So I want to touch on all three parts of this puzzle, all the parts, particularly the offensive and defensive cyber operations. I want to start with one that has been around for a long time, and that's the concept of a cyber Pearl Harbor. That's a concept that is at least 30 years old. Secretary Panetta used it, Secretary Hammer, Deputy Secretary Hammer used it back in the day, and basically it says that eventually we're going to be attacked in a way that basically cripples the country through our cyber infrastructures. Typically an attack on critical infrastructures, electric power, telecommunications, transportation, etc. It doesn't seem to have happened. But Kevin, you mentioned that we know for a fact that the bad guys are in our networks in a way that it maybe could happen. Is that because we're good at deterrence or just no motive?
I think the the real Pearl Harbor hadn't happened until December 7th, 1941. And so I think for us, the things that we may never have a cyber Pearl Harbor, but what I add up to make me think we should not discount it is how dependent we are on all this critical infrastructure. We fielded the vast majority of it before we thought about security. So it is we don't have the money to actually secure it all. We've seen actors like the Russians actually attack critical infrastructure and destroy it in other countries. We never thought they meant to do it at scale. It was always really more to make a point, to make the country back down. Stop fighting against what we're trying to do, sort of a foreign policy tool. And then we've actually seen them in our critical infrastructure. So my way of thinking is, if we're widely dependent on this type of infrastructure, and they have shown that they have done it and could potentially do it again, the question is, if we ever get to a point where it's in their interest to do it, would they have the ability, as Harry said, at the speed of the network, to push a button and destroy a large sector? By the way, Pearl Harbor didn't blow up every military capability in the country. It blew up the Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor. And it didn't get all of it, but it's still, it's one of the most significant things that ever happened in our country. And so in cyber, if you're really good, you can position yourselves with destructive malware in lots of places. And then at a time and place where you're choosing, if the target doesn't know, you push a button, and at the speed of the network, it's all smoked. And so I just look at the threat of that and some of the indicators that the threat's not far-fetched that make me think a cyber Pearl Harbor is possible. But I wouldn't say it's going to happen next week, and maybe we'll prevent it from ever happening.
John, can I take a shot at that?
Absolutely. I was going to ask you if you've been around this a long time, Harry.
Yeah, as General McLaughlin noted, the destructive capability of cyber is becoming more and more evident. And I sort of liken it in a way to the nuclear activity and capability that has developed over the years around the world. As a matter of fact, back in 2009, along with Ambassador Mark Grossman, we wrote an article about cyber deterrence. In other words, with nuclear weapons, we try to deter the use by a foreign activity by the fact that, you know, we're really talking about a weapon of mass destruction. Cyber has sort of grown into the area of also being a WMD, that it could be considered a weapon of mass disruption. And as Kevin pointed out, you know, there have been nations who have experimented with shutting down other nations. For example, Estonia, a number of years ago, was brought to its knees with a cyber attack that just crippled the entire nation. So I think that we have come to a point now where we are developing almost a philosophy of deterrence against using this, because it can be so disruptive and destructive, frankly. And it was brought out in with Kevin's comments that we can actually, through cyber, physically destroy assets these days. And so it is something of big concern, but I think it's almost elevated itself into that position of it's best to deter it based on strong capabilities that you have, that you deter the bad activity of bad actors around the world against your nation and your existence.
Great. And by the way, I can tell you we're not going to get even close to getting all our questions answered. I've already got 12 questions on the website, ndbs.questions@gmail.com, so please get those in, and I've got several great questions on the question cards. Lamont, I'll throw this one to you. There's a question that says, what do you look for? What kind of qualifications do you look for a future cyber warrior? How do you get the right kinds of people?
So I do want to, before I answer that question, I just want to say, really say thank you to AFA and a couple more organizations represented here today for all the work that you've done from a STEM perspective, and continue to kind of provide that pipeline that we need to continue to fill the cyber mission for us. I think we have a great pipeline from high school and from a college level on the type of individuals that we need that's qualified from a testing standpoint to be able to do the cyber mission. So I'm not overly concerned, I think, from a readiness perspective of our ability to put people in and through the pipeline. I think the biggest concern more so is keeping them in the military, specifically keeping them in the Air Force, because as you can imagine, while there's great opportunity to be able to be a part of this from a mission perspective and serving your nation, there's also a lot of competition from an industry perspective. We've benefited a lot from a few things that Congress have passed over the last 2 or 3 years to be able to provide better competitive packages for our military service members, but I think that's the biggest concern is keeping people in the Air Force and to continue to serve in these positions. But I don't think it's a big problem. We have more than enough bright servicemen and women to be able to conduct this mission.
Great, thanks. Kevin, you and Harry both brought up the Russian attacks in the past in Estonia and Crimea, those places. In fact, some authors cite that as the fact that the Russians have got the new form of warfare all figured out. It's going to be agile, sophisticated, quick moving with a short OODA loop. However, that doesn't seem to have happened in the most recent activity in Ukraine. So are we either, is that not being reported, not happening, or are we just missing it and all the other publicity about that war?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think on one hand, the Russians are probably among the world's best at information operations, using information they have to coerce, embarrass, pressure both governments and people to do what they want. And by the way, they were good at it before cyber was ever invented. It's just cyber gives them a platform where they can be especially effective at doing so. And so in some of those cases you mentioned, they were very quick to use authorities to coerce the Estonians, coerce the Ukrainians, coerce the Georgians, try to do the same against the French and others. But where I say it's a little bit of both, I think they assumed they would do the same to Ukraine. And some people think, well, Ukraine hasn't been attacked in cyber. General Nakasone, in his speech that I recommended, said he made sure it was clear, not so fast. They have been attacked. They've had serious attacks against them. Plus, for the first time, big companies, Viasat, Starlink, Elon Musk satellite communications company are two examples of commercial companies providing communication support to the Ukrainians that were attacked. But maybe it's because of persistent engagement. Maybe Cyber Command and some of our U.S. teams, I mentioned that hunt forward and defend forward. I haven't seen the details, but I would assume U.S. Cyber Command had people for months and maybe years leading up to this Ukraine invasion in Ukraine, helping the Ukrainians secure their network, maybe finding Russian presence and malware and getting it out in a way that the Russians just assumed it would crumble as soon as it was attacked. But I still see the Ukrainian president on TV routinely. They are still functioning as a government despite being under attack every day for months. So maybe it tells us also that some security and defense and preparedness can actually work even against a very high-end actor like the Russians.
If I could add one just footstep on the hunt forward operations, I think that's a significant new thing that we're doing from the U.S. Cyber Command perspective. I think in 2021, we sent 9 different teams out to our foreign partners to do a couple of things, right? To be able to prepare them and help them with their defense of their networks, which is why you may see Ukraine do a better job at defending against attack from Russia. And also, if you think about it from a U.S. perspective, Russians can use a place like Ukraine where there's limited protection from a defensive standpoint to be able to try new things out. So now if I'm the U.S., if I can go into that environment, I may get introduced to new techniques and new capabilities that's being tried out in that country. And now I can immediately share that domestic and foreign with our partners, and that's within the DoD and within industry as well.
Harry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, you know, as I have sort of studied this, and I've been out of the current operations now for a while, but I still maintain my security clearances and a great interest in this. But sort of something I've watched, and I think we're all seeing play out with the Ukraine operations today and other areas, is that the Russians are pretty sloppy in the way they attack things. You know, I don't think they're as surgical as others. Their attacks sort of go everywhere. And I liken that to what we're seeing on the ground in Ukraine these days. This has not been very precision oriented as far as their attack on the Ukrainians. But, you know, I also think and General Campbell, you'll remember this, you know, when the Russians have practiced with anti-satellite weapons, or by a mistake, they hit something up in space, and destroy it through a kinetic ramming operation, and debris goes everywhere. And then for years, we have to conduct space operations by flying around those debris fields in space. And I sort of liken it to the way they are conducting other military operations, including cyber. However, there's other folks on the other side of the world, the Chinese, who I would say are very well practiced and very devious in their operations, and also need to be the long time threat that we consider in cyber. Over.
Nice comment, Harry. I'm going to throw one back at you since you've got your microphone on. I know this is an area that you've been working in for a long time, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase this question. You know, we hear a lot about companies, big companies, that have enormous data breaches with loss of customer personal information and financial information. You watch the stock price, though, those companies, it doesn't seem to be affected by that sort of disclosure. For operating companies, cybersecurity is just a cost. And obviously, it's a cost-benefit decision on how much you put into cybersecurity. What's the incentive, or conversely the penalty, for a company to invest in serious cybersecurity?
Yeah, thanks, John. For my 12 years at Deloitte, after I retired from the military, I actually was part of starting their cyber security business, and specifically cyber risk management, and ended up with clients across the entire Deloitte enterprise of financial institutions, oil and gas, banking and finance, healthcare, retail, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the areas that I learned the most from, and the CEO that sort of gave me the best insight, was one of our clients was Jamie Morgan at JP Morgan Chase. And if you'll recall, there were a couple big cyber incidents with people breaking into JP Morgan Chase. And at the time we started working with them as Deloitte, I believe they were spending about $250 million a year on cybersecurity. By the time we left, they were up to investing $600 million, and I wouldn't be surprised now that an enterprise like JP Morgan Chase isn't investing close to $1 billion, if not $1 billion a year. And I think the thing that came true to me is that if you're on the front page of the Washington Post and you're a financial institution or other institution and you're being broken into, you're going to lose the confidence and trust of your clients. If you lose that, you lose your business. So people have to invest in the best way. Now, that's not always in the technology areas or buying software. That is also, and we're finding more and more, it's an enterprise-wide solution that has to be addressed. And frankly, it starts with the people, because people in your organizations are allowing more intrusions based on either not being trained or realize what's going on, and even the fact that businesses today have to protect about the insider threat to activity. So it's a large, cohesive type strategy that has to be put together in any business organization or military activity. Over.
Any other comments, gentlemen? Okay, that actually leads to another question that maybe both you could address. How does the government, I mean, your mission is to execute cyber operations for the U.S. government. Most of the infrastructure, though, is private. How does the government cooperate and assist the private sector and the commercial sector in protecting their assets?
That's another whole day of conversation.
Yeah, I know.
but I will say, in the macro, we have a chart, we used to call it the bubble chart. And so the bubble chart, which took months and months to negotiate, is sort of a government-wide portrayal of who's responsible for what in the US government. And it really focuses on three big parts of government: justice and FBI. And they basically say they're lead for law enforcement, lead for counterterrorism, lead for national security events, like big things and security events, but there's some things they're responsible for and lead for. On one side, you have DOD, lead for defending the country from attack, lead for security of national security systems, which are some of the NSA core responsibilities. But then you have DHS in the middle. And by the way, don't confuse my remarks. I'm not a critic of DHS at all. I feel bad for them because they have the hardest job. Their job is to both ensure the defense of the federal government, except for really DOD and the intelligence community, and to defend U.S. critical infrastructure. That's the word they kind of use. The reality is they don't have the people, dollars, or really the authority to actually, for the government, to defend that privately held infrastructure. So they are sort of the lead, I would say, support for that. They are the lead in the government for sharing information. They're the lead for maybe sharing best practices. A lot of non-military action, non-action verbs, in that responsibility. But it's because as a government, we have not crossed the threshold yet. I think we will, where the government is much more intrusive in insisting on the security of some critical infrastructure and using sticks and carrots the government has available to it. Regulatory pressure, law changes, carrots that might be through insurance or others. But at the moment, we leave it up to, Harry just mentioned some critical infrastructure sectors. By the way, the banks and financial services is where all the money is. Most of those organizations in other areas like energy, or some electric power, co-ops and others, they don't have the margins that the banks have, and they're not going to spend $600 million on cybersecurity. You often can't convince a CEO of some of those organizations to spend really much money. They just say, if it gets to where I'm attacked, the government will be involved, and we'll deal with it when that happens. So I think today the big gap in our policy is we have defense responsible for attacks from nation states. That's the Department of Defense defends our country from attacks in every domain, air, land, sea, and space, and cyber. But most of our policy and our focus we're talking about cyber incidents, including significant cyber incidents, things that might cause loss of life or economic harm. We treat that as a separate category. And for the most part, DHS leads most of that, and Justice and DOD would support. But DOD is responsible for defending the things you just mentioned. If we get in war with the Russians, when they fly their bombers over, try to attack us, they're not going to attack just military targets. They're going to attack strategic targets in the country. And in cyber, that means all these privately held critical infrastructure companies. And DOD, the government, is going to have to figure out a way to defend those. And at the moment, it is a major gap, I think, in our policy and strategy because we haven't figured out a way to do it.
If I may, I'll give you a real-world example to a certain degree. If anyone is familiar with U.S. Transportation Command, right? So we cannot do what we do from a DoD perspective without Transcom.
Like, there you
go. But at the same time, right? I was responsible for defense of Transcom system from an Air Force perspective. So we gained a very good understanding of adversary capability and intent as it would focus on U.S. Transcom, and we realized that they wouldn't necessarily attack at Scott Air Force Base, right? Because that was well defended terrain within the DoD, but a large portion of the customers and the workforce from Transcom is commercial industries. So a big part of it, and I think the key until policy catches up, is a partnership standpoint, right? So how do we partnership with, be it FBI, with OSI, that had the authorities to do some of the defensive measures that we wanted to do at the mom and pop shops and the other commercial organizations that provided direct support to U.S. Transcom. And you see that a lot be at the operational and tactical level. And I think we'll continue doing that from that perspective until policy catches up and try to kind of take care of that from an authority standpoint.
All right, I'm going to ask one more
Can I just,
question.
can I just maybe one more sentence?
Yeah.
The scale and magnitude of DHS's problem. DoD, Cyber Command today, I think is probably around 15,000 people, probably spending $600 or $700 million just on their own capabilities. And their mission space is smaller than DHS's. And so other countries like the Brits have actually brought some of their greatest government capability into their version of DHS. And so at the moment, we've given responsibility to an entity that we haven't given them authority or the capacity to do it. So I think somewhere that's got to be met. It's getting better, but we're at the rate we're going, we're going to have this gap for probably another decade or so. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll take a few from the floor. So, you know, if you watch the movies, or perhaps just your concept of offensive cyber operations, we have this vision of one mouse click and the city goes dark and bad things happen. In reality, the actual execution may be a mouse click, but leading up to that is a long period of access, reconnaissance, surveillance, tailoring of weapons, and battle damage assessment. Can you just talk to in general terms about the process it takes to set up an offensive operation?
Sure. Because of this unique part of the domain of cyber, the prep and lead up to the ability to deliver an attack is much different than almost every other domain. I could go to, the president can go to any commander he could go to the B-2 wing commander, or you name it, an air, land, or sea commander, talk about a mission they want to assign, and that commander could say, here's how long it will take, I'll need this many forces, this much time, but it's pretty well understood. In cyber, if that attack needs to be done against a military system we don't have access into, that means our force has got to maneuver through and gain access to a very secure, defended system. And at times, I'll just say we're really good. There might be times where we can do that, and we may have that access, but we can't guarantee it's always there. As soon as a change happens in the network, you could lose it. Or there might be things we've wanted to get access to for years and have not. So gaining access can take a long time and a lot of effort, a lot of resource. Maintaining it can take sometimes persistent help, work at it, and some luck that you're not discovered or they don't change something. And all of that has to be done so you could tell your Secretary of Defense, your boss, today these are the capabilities I have. You've asked me to do these other things and I do not yet have it, I'm sorry to tell you something I could do yesterday and I can't do today. That's just the nature of this domain. And so it is very different, and it is uncomfortable having to sit down with your leadership who's used to commanders in other domains giving them more definitive answers when at least at the moment, I don't know a way to be more definitive in this space than that.
So it's interesting. That's why, from a cyber perspective, we talk in terms of options, right? So here's the military objectives we're trying to get after, and then U.S. Cyber Command or the components can discuss the options they have to support that based on access. And access is imagine being the DO and have to go and tell the 3-star that the access we had 3 hours ago we no longer have because they reset a route, right? Cyber superiority is temporal. What I tell you today will not last tomorrow, and that's after 2 years of prep trying to get access to that device. So one of the other points I want to make, we kind of talked about General Nakasone and his role as the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and his role as the director of NSA and kind of wearing that dual hat. We've seen over the past few years the benefit of that, because in some cases it could be a case where with his NSA hat on he may have access that we do not have from a Cyber Command perspective, and vice versa. So now that unity of effort between the two has proven to be very beneficial.
Harry, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to just comment very quickly. I used a term earlier, surgical strike. And I think that's one of the big areas that we need to always be concerned about, because if you set, let's just call it, and I've been calling it this for years, if you set loose an evil set of electrons that are targeted against a certain activity or element, that usually is going to go against some particular software or some particular piece of hardware, and that hardware or software probably isn't unique to the one organization or activity or nation state that you're wanting to release this evil set of electrons on. And if you can't be able to surgically strike and stop that when you need to, it can come back on you or a bunch of other activities or organizations that you didn't intend to have that. And that has happened in the past, where a certain piece of hardware has been attacked, but other people, other nations of the world were also using that. And once you set that loose in a network, it's hard to stop it from just permeating on itself and flowing to every location that it's going to have that it can strike also. And that may not have been your, and certainly probably wasn't your intention.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Well, can we get a microphone?
I'm really loud.
Okay, go ahead. I just want to make sure that General Ratty can hear you.
Sure. So my question is, are there corollary organizations to our Cyber Command among our allies? And I'm specifically thinking of Five Eyes and NATO. And then how would you characterize our relationship with those? Is it, permanent joint task force, things like that?
It's a great question. I'll answer the back side first from my perspective, and both Harry and Lamont might have some thoughts. I would say, first of all, we have very close relationships with a whole host of countries. Certainly, our Five Eyes countries, partly because of maybe our brotherhood with NSA. They have a really strong partnership that goes back decades with the Five Eyes. Are sort of 5 countries that have worked very, very closely in cryptography and collecting intelligence going back to almost World War II. Canadians, Australians, Great Britain, New Zealand, and the United States. So we're really closely tied to those, but there are others too, and some that we work closely with that we don't talk much about. And it's not because it's partly because we have some partner A and partner B both work really well with us, but they don't like each other. So I'm just saying you have to manage the dynamics of coalition. Some of the senior commanders here have worked in coalition environments. You just have to do that. What I would say as a general rule, though, most of those countries haven't done what we've done. We have actually created an independent military capacity to conduct cyber warfare. Lamont mentioned standing up the training in schoolhouses inside all the military services to train 133 cyber teams on tasks that didn't exist before in schoolhouses that didn't exist before, and do it in 3 years. That was a cost we decided to bear because we wanted a military arm for cyber operations. Some of our other partners, what they basically did is they took their versions of NSA. So the Brits have an organization called GCHQ as an example. That's their NSA. So the Aussies have their own version, etc. And they made that organization sort of be the technical arm for offensive cyber. But then it is guided by the MOD. Their uniform guys plan and sort of direct it, but the arms and legs and expertise are sort of provided by their equivalents to the National Security Agency. It's sort of a pragmatic way to do it when you're small. It works pretty well. It's just me, like my counterpart in those countries when I was in Cyber Command, I had to talk to 2 people. I had to talk to sort of a GCHQ person and a general inside the MOD, and they were linked arm in arm, and I talked to both of them, whereas they just needed to talk to me because we had Cyber Command. So that's sort of how I think about it. But there are also many less developed countries. They don't have a cyber command of any type. They might have a a J6 in their, under their Minister of Defense that does C2, communication, command and control computers, as long as they have computers. But cyber commands and active operations in cyber, and even computer network exploitation, is not the purview of every country on the planet. And so I'd say it's more of the sort of developed countries have those capabilities.
Yes, sir. The microphone behind you.
There we go. All right. So my question is, I know for the U.S. military medical, everybody goes to the same roundhouse, down in San Antonio. Do they do the same with all the cyber? Is there one schoolhouse and all the services flow into it, or each is on their own?
So the answer is no. There's not one single schoolhouse, but there's one single standard. So the same curriculum that we teach at Keesler Air Force Base, for all of our airmen that's going to be in a specific work role, they're doing the same thing at Fort Gordon at their school as well. So that's how we continue to be able to kind of train at mass, but everyone has to follow the same standard. From an offensive standpoint, we also have some courses that's being taught by NSA, but it's the same curriculum that everyone has to go through.
Just one thing, some of y'all might have met General Keith Alexander. So he was the Army first commander of U.S. Cyber Command, the director of NSA for 8 years, I believe. But General Alexander and a few of his smart colonels, named Colonel Paul Nakasone and Colonel Jen Easterly, who's the director of CISA, but some really smart people came up with that construct to say, let's have all the services build their part of our cyber mission force, but let's do something that most joint commands don't do. We're going to own the standards of what they will train to. So every offensive team, whether it's Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or Air Force, has the same number of people, the same work roles, and their people are trained and certified to the same standard. And at least when I left, Cyber Command certified that those teams were ready for combat, with not the service. And so U.S. Cyber Command, from the beginning and even more today, functions a lot like U.S. Special Operations Command, which is sort of both a combatant command and a service-like entity at the same time. So it is kind of unique in sort of controlling lots of parts of the human capital side of cyber warfare, even though the military services are the arms and legs that deliver that.
Harry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, that's a great question, and it really hits at something that is near and dear to my heart. And we touched on this just a little bit earlier, and Kevin had some thoughts on this, but it involves overall education. I know that the question was the training and education within the military, but let me just say that in today's world, it really starts way beyond that. And education has become, one of the areas that I am just dearly involved with and interested in. And John Campbell and I have worked for years with universities at developing cybersecurity programs, bachelor's, master's degrees, doctorate degrees. But it goes even earlier than that. I think during the introduction, it's noted that I'm involved with the National Cybersecurity Center. We are involved very much with education of our youth. And that starts now at elementary school. We actually conduct cyber camps, and there's other organizations that have summer camps, where kids who are naturally involved and interested in digital technology can really learn some cyber skills. Also, I've been involved now on the senior advisory group for the Air Force Association's Cyber Patriot program for 12 years. And that is a competition, training and competition that's around all of the middle and high schools around the entire United States. As a matter of fact, it's now spread into 5 or so different nations of the world. And there's an annual competition that chooses a national leader. We also have those kind of educational opportunities and training at the collegiate level, with programs like Capture the Flag. So STEM education is very important, and it's not necessarily just getting a degree, but also industry and government today are looking for people who will be educated in just certificate programs. So there's a lot of education and training that can take place. If you've got kids or grandkids, get them into it, because our National Cyber Director, Chris Inglis, talked about the hundreds of thousands of seats that are unfilled today with cyber-related organizations and activities, where we could be filling those seats with people who could build a lifetime career opportunities, whether at the intermediate levels, all the way up to being supervisors, or you may end up working in the White House, should you desire to be the National Cyber Director. So I wanted to put that plug in. It's also very important, I talked earlier about a large business organization that was investing millions of dollars in cybersecurity, but also you can't forget the small and medium businesses that also have to protect themselves. In hiring the right people to be able to help them keep their businesses alive, trusted by their constituents, and developing their organizations and growth. Over.
All right, in the interest of time, we're going to have to cut it off. And by the way, I apologize to all of you who are ready to ask a question. I apologize to you who wrote down questions, because I knew we wouldn't have time to get to them all, but we appreciate the questions. Normally, I would ask the last question, and in fact, I was past the last question, but rather than me ask it, I'll just let Scott ask it.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question that I took up to General Campbell a short time ago. General Radke, Scott Murray here, good to see you again. And I just, you kind of played to what my last question was going to be. I thought it would be a good question for us all. I don't want to sound like a newsman here, but whenever I go to some event like this, I always try to think, what is my take home? What am I going home with? What did I learn? Now, how do I put it into play in my world? As a citizen of this great country that we all call home, you're talking about the military, you're talking about political, you're talking about corporate America, but how do we, everybody in this room here, and this is to you both as well, not just to the general, what should we take home? How can we take everything that you've all shared with us today, put it into our lives so that we can protect and be smart and take care of all the things in our world with our friends and family? What comes to mind?
Harry, you want to take that one? Then we'll go to the other two.
Well, I'll tell you, Scott, and it's great to see you again. We worked together so closely on a number of things there. What I would say is that everybody needs to realize that cyber and cybersecurity and cyberspace operations are very complex and they're very big. They've grown in importance. It is now national security. It's at that level for our nation's actual survival. So learn more about it, become more educated. There's programs that are even offered free, even through the National Cybersecurity Center, which I'm involved with. Log on to us and see the kind of training programs that we have and educational programs. But that's what I would say, is become educated, become learned in this, because it's right in your own house, and it's also involved with the overall security of our nation as a whole. Over.
Kevin?
Just to echo Harry's comments, I teach a class on this sort of almost a survey of national security cyber over a semester. I obviously don't use any classified information. I use all public source data. Now, sometimes it's things in the media, but so you have the ability to go find just about anything going on. The government's been very open. General Nakasoni's congressional statements every year. Big, long list, unclassified. It's published on his website. It'll tell you in his words the things as a citizen you might want to pay attention to and the things that he's doing. And so that would be my main thing is this is important enough, I think, that all of you should learn to some degree about this. At the very least, it lets you ask your elected officials, what are they doing about it? It lets you be an informed citizen on a set of areas that sound arcane and esoteric, maybe if you at the first time through it. But it really does boil down to a set of things that I think You know, my dad's a smart guy, but he's 80, but my dad and I can sit down and talk about it, and I think he can understand the basic things as a citizen that he ought to care about, and then maybe jump up and down and assist people that either, you know, that he votes for might care about it. So I think it's a great question, but I do think it's a hard thing these days. There's so much information out there. You could say, well, Kevin, how many things do I need to be an expert on? And so, because there's a lot, but this is one that it seems to cut across so much of who we are as a country and our society that it would be worthy of your time.
By the way, 80 is not really that old.
You're welcome to get out.
Lon, you have.
As he had me to mic. I would say that one takeaway is we're better as a collective whole, right? It takes a whole nation response to do some of the things that we talked about. I met someone earlier that works at Raytheon, right? We're trying to partner with industry because we have to do a better job at defending our weapon systems, right? We have not been able to kind of create those relationships in the past, but if you work in industry, how do we partner with U.S. Cyber Command, with Air Force's Cyber? If you're in academia, I think General Nakasone and U.S. Cyber Command announced a few months ago that they've created a new partnership with academia where they're working with 80 plus institutions to kind of continue to build out cybersecurity capability and capacity from that perspective, and also government as well. And as we continue to work with other government agencies to share information and so we can operate using our own unique authorities.
Gentlemen, thank you. Harry, hope you feel better and recover. We're sorry you couldn't be here, but appreciate you zooming in with us. Kevin Lamont, thank you so much. I just want to say, I've been around this business for a long time. I consider myself fairly well read, and I learned a lot today. And I'm very encouraged, frankly, with what I heard. So thank you for sharing that with us. So let's give our panelists. I'm going to bring Scott back up. We got a presentation to make and then a couple of drawings to make. So, Scott.
Once again, I'll reiterate what General Campbell just said. General Radegay, General McLaughlin, and McLaughlin, and Colonel Atkins. We can't thank you enough today. That was above and beyond. I tell you what, just way above and beyond this. I've been to all of these events, and I thought maybe this is the best ever. This was just great, all that you shared with us. So thank you very much. And as a result of that, we'd like to give you a small token of our appreciation for all that you were a part of today. We have, as they say, parting gifts. Somebody named Oprah started this, I think. So at any rate, we do have some parting gifts here. Let's see. And because we know you have a room full of trophies and plaques, I'm sure, that just goes from here to wherever, we selected 3 books. And here are the 3 books that we're going to share with you. And if you already have one, then you can do a little trading out, and maybe you don't have number 1 or number 2, you can give him number 3 or whatever works. Okay, we'll let you do that on your own. And so you'll find also a certificate of thanks from the NDBS Executive Committee inside the book. And we also have some shirts.
We have a shirt.
Oh, excuse me. That's right, a shirt. That's right. And Colonel Atkins, you'll get to wear it on Monday and Tuesday. And then, whatever works. We try to do our best, folks. No, whatever size you take, I mean, it looks like the 2 of you could fit in that one. But you can see what it says on there, so that's our official shirt. So wear it proudly wherever you might be, and we'll make sure that we get one to General Radegay as well. So one final time, weren't they outstanding? All right. Are you going to? Patty? Where are you? Oh, do you have the bin for the 50-50 raffle? Were these people extremely generous with the 50-50 raffle? I guess that means not this time. Okay. Are you serious? So we're going to split the 520? So very quickly, that would be what, 260?
You got it.
260, okay, very good. So somebody's gonna get $260. Come on up, Patty. All right. Well, the general or the colonel, I'll let them flip a coin to see who's gonna pull out, and then they get to split as well with whoever wins. So that would be 130 apiece, right? If my math is good. So, okay, and you have to be here, obviously, to win it. 5, 3, 7. You all still in the running? Okay. 4, 5, 8, 7. Are you serious? Oh my gosh, you look who won it. Here goes to NDBS. Oh, very good. He's going to give it to NDBS. How about it? Thank you, Chuck, very much. He's been our audio man today. And also, as I said before, we have a round of golf out here on the golf course. So we're going to do this as quickly as we can, but obviously as profitably as we can. Who'd like to go play golf? Anybody? There, well, okay, then here we go. Let's do this as quickly as we can. Who wants to give me an opening bid of $10,000? Well, I'm just trying to make some money for. How many people have been to a live auction before? Raise your hand. Good. There's 10. There's 5. There's 10. Okay. All right. Who wants to give me an opening bid? 400. I'll take 400. Do I get 500? 500. $400. You all know where the money goes, so it's a good bid. Huh? 500? Do I see 500? Everybody tear their rotator cuff this morning or what? Can't get that hand up there quite as far as you'd like to. 500? Thank you, Super. Oh, that's great. Thank you, sir, very much. Can we go 6? 600? I got 400 here, now I've got 500. And he's thinking, oh my gosh, I think I bought the farm. 600? Do I see 600 any place in the room? 600. 600? 600? 600? 500? 500? Okay, I'm 500 once. 512. This is it twice. This is for 4 guys. It's not just for one person. Oh. Okay, I guess that's it. Go have fun. It's yours for $500. Thank you very much. All right, the last order of business is to remember 2 dates. September 25th and December 11th. Okay? December 25th and December 11th. Those are our next 2 gatherings, and we certainly hope that you're going to be here as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great summer, and stay well. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Ted came over to me 5 minutes ago and said, Scott, I've got one more thing to share with the audience, and I forgot, and I am so sorry. Here, I got so carried away with that live auction, you know.
Thank you. I appreciate it. By the way, 2 things. Number 1, I think Scott made something really great statement. Everything he goes to, he likes to walk away with something. I'd just like to tell you, I spent 50 plus years in the intelligence and IT community. My specialties were banks, brokerage houses, and insurance companies. And just so you don't think this happens to you, it probably happens to you and your grandchildren. 95% of hacks in private companies occur from their employees. Clicking on a link on the phone, they think it's from their girlfriend. They click a link on the phone and think it's from his buddy. They get a click on their info and says, what do you want to bet on the football game? And from that, it gains access to corporate databases through trouble. Second, I would just like, by the way, I'd like to thank you all for your patience, and I'd really like to thank our speakers tonight. I did want to go over and our sponsorships. A number of you bought individual tickets tonight with $35. Individual patrons were $100. A table patron is $250, and an event patron is $1,000. Some of you own corporations, companies, okay? We would like you to do something similar as to what Texas Credit Union did, all right? It's become a corporate sponsor for us. Our corporate sponsors start at $1,500, $2,500, $5,000, and $10,000. Texas Credit Union is a NIMS sponsor at $10,000. We will, by the way, FYI for you, entertain $50, $100, 150 and 200,000. If you need that, please contact me, and we'll be sure to set up a luncheon or a meeting to get together. And I thank you again for your participation and wish you a great weekend. Thank you.